It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 373 or 72? I think 72.
Whatever you say.
I think 72.
One of those.
Yeah, so
372.
We've not recorded for like 3 weeks, so
Happy
we're
New Year.
a little out of habit.
It's good to be back.
Happy New Year.
Speaking of who are you? Who are you?
I'm the guy next door.
Did you remember to do introductions?
Nope.
Oh crap! No, I didn't. Oh man.
We are some people.
So
Professionals.
tonight I'm Belgast, and tonight I'm joined by Ammo
Hello.
and Ash
Welcome to the year 12,022.
and Grace
Hi.
and Kodra
No, it's clearly still 20XF.
and Tam
Hello.
and Thalen.
Yeah, I'm going with 20 XDX.
So yeah, no, it's been a minute.
Good job. We're pros.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there are people that literally believe that the intro is like pre-recorded, and no, it's not.
Yeah,
like
no,
I
they're
just
very
Possibly believe that.
I just crash landed it, and I was a belly landing in a highway out in the middle of nowhere.
Like, have we literally ever said
No.
the same things twice? Ever?
No.
I
Well,
feel like I should be enough to let people know that the intro is not pre-recorded.
So no.
That's true.
I can believe that it's that time for another episode of AggroChat. People could believe is pre-recorded. You're very consistent with that.
It's true.
No.
Everything after that flies off the rails real fast.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm usually fairly consistent because I go first, and I'm like, I'll just say hello.
The funniest episodes, though, my favorite of all time, is when fate has conspired against us, and Grace is the first person. because like, if there's an auditory deer in the headlights sound, that's the thing Grace makes when it happens.
Is that what? The
Accurate.
order's completely wrong.
What? No.
Wait,
How?
what?
How?
How did we get
Scripts,
here?
editing, we know not these things.
So tonight we are going to record our Games of the Year show,
Yay.
because that is a tradition
At this point.
at this
Also,
point.
Reminder,
It's
many of
how
the
we
games
do.
we're talking about didn't come out this year. We just
Oh,
played
yeah.
them this year.
So the other thing is, this is probably the most diverse list of games that we've ever had, because very few of us played the same things.
We were mostly just all playing our own things.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. Like we had to cut, like, we normally have a handful of games and then a bunch of honorable mentions that we go through, and aren't we like cutting all the honorable mentions because
We're only
Basically.
keeping two
Yeah.
that had a lot of picks. I mean, there were two that had a couple picks apiece, but most of the honorable mentions were like singletons. Like, that was just one person had an honorable mention of that thing. So
there's
yeah,
probably
like,
a whole lot of like interesting like analysis we could do about just that phenomenon by itself, but
Nah.
well, and there were a lot of picks, but there wasn't much actual overlap. So, okay, so just some background behind this. Ash puts out a survey every year, and the survey has
Here, but last
3
year I was lazy.
actual picks, and then a slot for us to put whatever we want for honorable mentions. There was almost no overlap in our actual picks.
In a list
so
of
when I-
21 games, we got, 18 individual
something like that.
choices?
Yeah.
yeah.
So I ended up counting honorable mentions towards the few that actually got the main picks as well. So we ended up with a sort of order. So usually what we do is we sort it, ascending. So the game with the most picks is the last thing we talk about. But this year was just weird. So
Well, it's weird. It's weird in a couple of directions, because on the one hand, it's more fragmented than I think we've ever been. But on the other hand, I think everybody did have a full selection of games and honorable mentions.
yeah. Yeah,
which is
For the most part.
also rare.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah, I
like
mean, part of this is there were a lot of good games.
yeah, like there were a bunch of good games, and
I would also like to point out that there are, at least as far as we played, not a whole ton of really big releases.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah. Well, this is my thing is there were a couple, but like, I think there were a couple there that are going to be on this list that were pretty big, like releases. It's just, they were kind of to a niche audience. Like, and if we look back at our really big releases, like the games that get all of us going, they're not actually usually AAA games. Like, if I think about,
There have been a few.
it's true, there have been a few, but when I think about like the games that get us all excited, it's almost everything that Supergiant does.
Yeah, I was just thinking that
There's
we
that.
couldn't agree this year because Supergiant didn't put out something new this year.
Yeah, what's up with that?
So yeah, there was no Hades for everyone to pick. But also the FF14 expansion came out in December, and that's also been a thing we've tend to all pick when it comes out.
It's true.
Yeah.
That is a thing that we all pick when it comes out, but this year it's been very difficult for a lot of us to play that.
Yes.
Wait, but didn't we all pick it? I thought it got 7 votes.
6. We got 6 votes.
Yeah.
If you include honorable mention.
Look, tabulation is a thing. I tried real hard, but nobody put the games in the same spelling in their honorable mentions.
Yep.
If
Anyway.
you didn't
happens.
think you picked Final Fantasy 14, you picked it.
Yeah. Anyway, let's actually get into the games, because otherwise we're not ever going to get through this.
It's true.
Details.
So we're going to start off with a couple of games that got honorable mentions. First, Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut. I know Ghost was on last year's list too, but they re-released the game in a Director's Cut edition with like a whole bunch of, well, it's basically a DLC island, right?
It's like it's like the PS5 release plus a bunch of extra content and DLC island and so on and so forth.
Still a super good game. And like, I was not prepared for what a difference PlayStation 5 version was going to be over the PS4 version. And like, even PS4 version playing on PS5, it was a 9-day difference when the actual PS5 version came out.
Yeah, like there are not a lot of games that I have played where I've like, oh, I played the PS4 version and I played it on PS5 and I felt like, wow, what a difference. Ghost is definitely one of them. And like, it still sits in my, at least for me, it's still sat in my honorable mentions because it was my game of the year last year, because it's the first game that I've been playing kind of a little bit at a time, carefully, quietly for an entire year. And I kept doing that this year. Like, I still haven't beaten that game. I'm just casually making my way through it and absorbing the sights and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I still haven't beaten it either, but I keep poking my head back in every so often.
Yeah, the whole PlayStation 5 versus PlayStation 4 version is the main reason that I haven't played it yet. And I'm pretty sure that I'm going to pick it up here shortly. So it's entirely possible that this will end up on the Games of the Year again for this year.
I just started playing it, so like I've only played the PS5 version, so I can't really compare it to the PS4 version, but I was pretty amazed like how quickly I just like got drawn into it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this game is really cool. I've really gotten absorbed in it.
It's such a good game, and so much of it is like, and I've mentioned this before, so I'll be brief, but so much of it for me is just like, I enjoy wandering around and seeing the sights and just taking in the view and stopping and smelling the flowers. And like, as a bit of meta commentary, I've been stuck in my house a lot for the last 2.5 years, 2 years, somewhere in there. I don't even know anymore. It's been a long time. Year and a half. I don't even know anymore. Time is
about 2 years.
A mess.
Been about 2 years.
But I've been stuck at home a lot, and like, I haven't done very much traveling. I certainly haven't spent very much time outside. Like, I've been craving that go out and wander and look at beautiful places and video games that are letting me do that in a sort of undirected, vague way have really been capturing my attention lately. And Ghost isn't the only one, but it's definitely a big one.
Yeah, I've had the urge to play Skyrim again recently, and I think maybe Ghost of Tsushima might be where I need to direct that urge, because it sounds like it'll do a lot of the same stuff for me when I want out of that, and not be a game that I've played 50 times already.
Yep.
I keep thinking that Ghost is something I should try, just because, like, especially as you talk about just wandering around, that does sound attractive. Like, for me, I have a bit of like anxiety when I look at it, because it reminds me of so many games I'm kind of tired of. And I understand that, like, it's different in some way, which is what everyone tells me, but I just, like, I look at it and I see another, like, Ubisoft, like, here's a bunch of POIs on a map, go do everything game.
I think you could play it like that, but I don't think you need to.
Yeah, so, like, that exists. Like, there are lots of points of interest on a map, but you could probably make it all the way through the game only following story chunks. And the story chunks are very, like, different from that specific style of play.
I've had experiences in that game where I started up and I just wander around looking at views for an hour, and then I stop and I'm done for the day. And it was great. And I think that's, I promise this is the only time I will talk about it on this show. It is also what I'm doing in Star Citizen, where I'm just going and looking at cool views, and that's all I really care about. It's not objective focused. It's not anything other than, hey, I just want to, like, wander and smell the flowers.
I think one of the unique things about Tsushima is a lot of big open world games like that are really bleak, and, like, good things aren't happening on this island, but it also doesn't feel just overwhelmingly bleak.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is in a lot of ways it's sort of a meditation on, like, even when bad things are happening, there is still beauty. And in order to get through the bad things, you should focus on the beauty as well as your response to the bad things. And I like that.
So another game that was in the honorable mention column, but I thought was worth discussing a little bit, is Cozy Grove.
Ghost bears.
It is an island full of ghost bears, and you help the ghost bears do things, and it is charming as hell. And honestly, it's a very Animal Crossing kind of feeling game, but it's a great game.
It's delightful. I love the art. I love all the bears. It's incredibly chill. It doesn't yell at me when I forget about it for a month and then wander back to it. It's just incredibly charming. I played the hell out of it when it first came out, and then I pick it up every once in a while just to poke at it, and there's been fun little holiday events and other things added. I haven't looked at it in a little bit. I'm sure that there's a lot of new things. I think if I had one complaint, it's that it's got a really charming sort of story happening, but you have to play it for a really long time to unlock all of the bears. But it was incredibly fun. I spent a ton of time playing it this year, and it definitely deserved an honorable mention.
I really need to try this game.
It looks super cute.
It does.
I will be honest, I had challenge finding the thing I was doing in Animal Crossing that was of interest to me, and, like, kind of bounced off of it for that reason. I know that's a me thing. So I don't know that this is necessarily going to be the game that fixes that for me, unless you think that there might be something more here that's up my alley.
I mean, my sense, and I haven't really played Animal Crossing, but it seems like there's a little bit more of a story happening here with these ghost bears. They're all individuals, but their stories kind of piece together. So my sense is that's a little bit more substantive than what's happening in Animal Crossing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in Animal Crossing, you kind of have to make your own story. I mean, there's a flow to the island, but it's basically daily quests. And this actually has, like, Cozy Grove actually has a story that you're following.
Okay.
So that's definitely what hooked me in, is it wasn't just, okay, I'm gonna upkeep some plot of land and like collect things, which I enjoy, but it's also, what's up with these ghost bears? Why are they ghosts and bears? What are they doing on this island? Why am I an adorable child scout? They're helping them. Why don't I have an adult?
Why did the adults send me to this island?
And then send me really sketchy letters about why I'm still on the island. It's actually one of my favorite parts of that game, is every once in a while you get a letter from the person who's supposed to be your adult explaining why you're still there by yourself.
You're going to need to stay on that island for a bit longer. I think one of the best things that Cozy Grove has going for it is, unlike Animal Crossing, it's like multi-platform as hell. I think it's on everything. So now we actually get into the pick list. And the first one of these is Boyfriend Dungeon.
Yay. This one was mine. I don't think anyone will be shocked.
Now, this is a game that it's been a really long time since the Kickstarter.
Yes, it has been a very long time. I've been excited about it the whole time. And I was completely happy when it released. I didn't play any of the beta version. I just started playing it when it released, and I loved it. Now, there's some really valid criticism about the story, but I enjoyed it for myself and based on the context of my own personal experiences. But also, it was just super fun to smooch a bunch of swords. I mean, how can you not love a game where you fight through a dungeon with a sword, and then when you're finished, you go out on a date with said sword, who is also an attractive human person.
It's like a mix between like sentient weapons from D&D and Lieutenant.
But the animations were very cute. The setting is really adorable. I enjoyed the majority of the weapons. Folks who listen to me rant on the show probably know I'm not always a huge fan of melee combat in games, but I actually really enjoyed it in this one. Maybe I just need more opportunities to smooch my weapons, and then I will enjoy it. I don't know.
Hey, there you go.
Maybe they just need to be more attractive to me.
Taking notes.
I mean, we do know somebody that carried around a golf bag full of swords, so, I mean, he seemed to be very attracted to his weapons.
Yeah. I don't know that that's...
But yeah, Boyfriend Dungeon was great, and would definitely recommend, with the caveat about the story. Look up some of the trigger warnings that people have put out there about it, but otherwise, definitely recommend.
So next up on the list follows the logic that we set ahead of time, that basically these are our games of the year. not necessarily games that came out in a given year. And this year, Kodra has been playing a lot of Celeste.
I have been, and we also haven't put it on any of our lists in the past, so I feel okay about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually did play through Celeste when it first came out. I played through the up to the summit, and then I stopped. And I looked at the core. I looked at like the idea of B-sides and doing something harder. And for me, I was like, you know what? I just struggled through this game. I don't want to do this right now to myself. And I sort of put it on the back burner. And then sometime after I did that, they released the final update. So what they released this year was another update, 1.4 code, which did a number of things aimed around making the top tier of play more accessible, and also just some general quality of life improvements. And that was interesting to me. And then I saw some people posting some clips of them working on Farewell, and Farewell looked really interesting and really cool. And so I decided that, yeah, I think I'm actually going to pick this game back up and start playing it again. And so I played through all of the base game, all of the A, B, C sides, and Farewell. And the game is very, very good at teaching you complicated concepts throughout the game. Like, it teaches you new tricks and new like things you can do in this very interesting movement engine. And it does so very naturally. Like, here's a trick that you're going to like have to figure out the very basics of how to get around. This teaches you a new way that your character can move through the screen. Then we're going to take it up and we're going to like, okay, now can you figure out how to apply that to a slightly more complicated solution? Like, I realize this is very much like gameplay as tutorial 101, but it's done very well. And the thing that I love is, to me, it kind of felt almost like a movie with a good twist in it that recontextualizes the rest of the movie. Like, I'm thinking the M. Night Shyamalan. If I go back and I do this thing knowing what I have learned, it's going to be a wildly different experience. That is what Celeste feels like to me. Because once you go back and you do the first levels, knowing everything that you eventually learn throughout the game, it's a wildly different experience. Like, there are whole areas that are designed with certain tricks in mind that you're not supposed to learn until much later in the game. And they are not impossible to do. Like, they're definitely possible to do without those tricks. It's just, if you want to do them as fast as possible, you need those types of tricks and techniques in order to do this. And this is what ultimately got me into speedrunning the game, is the ability to take all of the very cool things that I learned throughout the game and apply them to the base game. And then it's very fun to watch. It's very fun to experience. And it's been really cool. Like, I don't know many games where I feel like there is a mechanical thing that the game you always have access to, you just are never taught. And once you are taught it, it like recontextualizes the game prior to that. And that felt very fun to me. And I think that's very cool. And I don't know of many other games that can do that or can claim to have done that.
I think that and I also played through Celeste start to finish when it first came out. And I never went back to do any of the harder stuff, but I definitely, I think that is a thing that Metroidvanias should do more of. And I often feel like they don't do enough of. And Celeste is not a Metroidvania, but it captures that feel really well.
Right. Like, listening to you describe it, it sounds like Metroidvania, but instead of a hook shot, you are the hook shot. You learned a thing along the way.
Skill.
Yeah, that's the thing. I never had to unlock the hook shot. I just had to be taught how to do it.
Yep.
And then the next time you play, you just get to start with the hook shot. And what does that change? Yes. I think that's very interesting.
It is also, incidentally, it is also how I feel about Zelda games. Although it's not really a skill thing, it is definitely a you get items thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, incidentally, this is also why I'm very interested to see what their next game is, since they are going into they're calling it exploration genre.
Read Metroidvania.
Yes.
So the next game on the list is Chicory, A Colorful Tale.
So this was a Kickstarter game that came out ahead of its predicted release date.
What?
Which is completely unheard of. But this game had been around a while as a show demo. I played it as a show demo when it was called Draw Dog. And the joke was that there's no way in the world I wasn't going to like this game, as it starred a canine with a paintbrush. And quite frankly, that's accurate. It's another sort of Zelda-like, where instead of getting the hook shot, you get new things to do with a paintbrush. Like maybe your paint glows, or maybe you figure out how to paint bridges.
Interesting. I had not gotten to that point. I'm very early on in this game. So I'm curious to see where it goes.
And the music is by the same person who did the music for Celeste, Lena Raine.
I was about to say, Lena Raine is getting a lot of love here.
And honestly, the game's story is kind of what I needed last year. It's
I know that
a little hard to say too much more than that, but this game was extremely good, and more people should play it. Also, it just came out on the Switch in December and is very well suited to motion controls.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it would be, yeah.
So it coming out on the Switch was what got my partner to play it, and I haven't played it, but I was asked if we were going to talk about it on the show. It is definitely her game of the year.
Okay.
Yeah, very good.
I know very little about it, but
well, one of the things I kind of want to talk about, which is a thing that was kind of through me, like how much this game just there is a bit of a like, oh well, a lot of this game's mechanics are devoted to trying to like you're doing things that aren't necessarily like changing the state, but you just like, this is a black and white screen. I'm going to sit here and color it a little bit.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing, because you can just do that.
Yeah.
You have a paintbrush. The screens start pretty much entirely black and white.
Just why not paint the screen?
Add some colors. The colors you have available to you vary a bit by area, which is kind of an interesting touch, especially if you paint like yourself or your own clothes, since you can carry those colors into other areas then.
Oh, neat.
Like you can't paint things those colors, but you stay those colors.
Oh, okay.
And eventually you can get fancy things like, this is just a big giant star I can put wherever I want, or this causes my paint to make weird patterns when I put it down. A lot of really cool stuff just related to that, like just related to the mechanics of putting paint on the screen. It was a really fun game.
That sounds very cool.
it looked really neat.
Yeah, it's very visually appealing.
So yes, yet another game starring a canine with a paintbrush that I'm a big fan of.
I mean, I'm a huge fan of that level of specificity. Like,
something. If I had a nickel for every.
I'd have two, but still really
You'd have two nickels. The next game on the list is a really interesting option. Deathloop.
yeah,
And like, I really wanted to love this game, but like, I just struggled with it. And I know we talked about it on the show, but like, this game like has so much personality, and the setting has so much. I don't know what word to even use. Like, it has a really good sense of place.
Was this the actual winner for Game of the Year this year? Wait, no, at the Game Awards? Oh, no, right. It Takes Two won.
It Takes Two won, which probably could have been on this list, but neither Tam nor I actually finished it, and we were deeply concerned with where the story was going last we played it.
We should probably find out at some point.
We should find out if we are concerned or elated by this weird game. But yeah.
But so Deathloop, I mean, it's a game by the Arcane, the Dishonored team. There was no way I was not buying it. Like, I have the same level of trust that I'm going to enjoy a game made by Arcane as I do Supergiant, possibly more. So when I first started seeing ads, and this game looked like, honestly, the first time I saw this game, it looked like a PvP shooter.
Yeah.
I was like, really? I don't know if this is a thing. Like, I don't know if I'm going to want this game, but it's Arcane. I'm going to pick it up. And I've talked a lot about stealth games, and I'm actually going to call back to something that Kodra said about Celeste earlier. One of the things that I love about stealth games is it is not about the not being seen. Like, yes, it is the thing that I think most, whenever you see stealth done badly, it is because whoever is making the stealth game is thinking about stealth from a stealth is about not being seen standpoint. But that's really not what a good stealth game is about. And despite the, honestly, the going loud and shooting everybody, which happens a lot in Deathloop, portions of that game, it has the soul of a stealth game, which is there's a lot of you're dropped in a very open but very dense space, and maneuvering through that space and moving through that space and understanding that space inside and out gives you an advantage and allows you to approach that same space in different ways as your understanding grows. And one of the biggest issues I have with stealth games in a lot of cases is you go through a level and you understand that level, and then you don't ever return to that level because you beat it. And so that understanding only ever crystallizes in later playthroughs. This is not the case in Deathloop. In Deathloop, you're going back to the same levels frequently, often many times, and it both changes the layouts of the levels slightly. So like the way some of the terrain is placed, the lighting, the location of enemies, the location of items, objectives, etc. But sometimes you're just going back to the same place and doing either the same thing but better, or a different thing in the same space. And so you really get a feel for the spaces in Deathloop because you're going back through and around them so often. And it means that there's all kinds of interesting secrets you can find, all kinds of interesting little tidbits and side stories, and the kinds of things that stealth games are so good at delivering if you're there to pay attention to them. But now they're delivered in a way that you can actually catch them all because you don't have to like sit around in a level forever, maybe not seeing them because you might come back.
Because you can always come back?
You can always come back. And the premise with which it does that is real interesting. Like, I think Ash has mentioned before that if you're gonna do a story based around time travel, you really need that needs to be the thing it's about. It can't just be a MacGuffin, because then it's bad.
More accurately, stories about time travel are fine. Stories with time travel tend to be terrible.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about Deathloop is that it is not a story about time travel, but without the time travel, the story wouldn't work. And it is the only game that I've played in years now with a twist that I didn't see coming. And boy, did that hit hard. It has one of the best. I so hesitate to call her a villain, but the villain of the game is so good. She's on par with, I mean, name any other video game villain I've dealt with. In terms of the like talking to you and making commentary and so forth, she blows Handsome Jack out of the water. And Handsome Jack was a great, well-written villain. And I appreciate that the game is so unrepentantly what it is. Like, it's taking like 70s blaxploitation movies and reappropriating a lot of the parts of them. So it's like the trappings of a thing, but heavily redesigned and reconsidered in a way that I don't often see. So it's like Deathloop wins for me because it's got incredible level design, incredible just set pieces that I expect from Arcane, but it also has a really compelling story, a fascinating new take on stealth game mechanics that lets you have fun with all of the things that stealth games let you do, including the stuff that you're technically not supposed to do, like open fire and just blow everything up. And you can just do that and keep on moving forward without reloading a save or even needing to care about reloading a save. And then it's also this like interesting media study on top of it. And it is incredible music. Like just it's hitting on every cylinder for me.
One of the interesting things I thought when I was playing around with it is like the whole going loud thing is absolutely something you're going to do often, but you're going to do so in a very strategic manner. Like you're not usually going to just walk in guns blazing. You're going to choose a strategic moment when all the conditions are right for you to cause mayhem like that, so that you can either funnel them down a predicted path or because like when I have tried to just open up and kill everything in sight, it has been very difficult to do so. They're potentially smarter than I am,
but there's and there's more of them than you.
Yeah, a lot more.
But also, you know, I am the quintessential clean hands player. There are absolutely times where I'm like, stealth is the wrong answer here. I'm just going to blow something up.
I spent a lot more time baiting enemies to behave a way that was beneficial for me.
Yeah. And I think that's to me, that's a big part of the stealth game experience. It's not so much the not being seen, it's the you're smarter than these enemies. You got a bunch of things to make them dance to your tune.
What ended up killing the game for me is the inability to save in the middle of a loop.
Yeah.
Because the loops are long enough that it's just a little too long for a single sitting at some times for me. Because like I'd have to get up and then, oh crap, I just lost everything that I just did because there's no way for me to save the game and come back to it.
Yeah, the thing that bugs me about it is it has a cycle going on where if you the first like time or two I went into any level by loop you mean any individual like level that you go into?
Yeah, any individual level.
Yeah, like because those levels are so big, the first time I went in them, I spent like an hour, 90 minutes in them, exploring and carefully picking my way through and so forth. But then like later when I hit the when the game like really hits its stride, I'm hitting those levels and going in, doing the thing I need to and getting out. And it's like, you know, sometimes I'd be in a level for 2.5 minutes. And if I had to pick a flaw with the game, I think that it doesn't do a great job of messaging, hey, you don't need to spend an hour in here right now. You'll be back. Don't worry.
There was just one mission that I ended up needing to do like 4 times in a row because something would happen and I'd need to walk away from the machine.
Yeah.
And it was very early on and I was trying to carefully gather weapons that I'm going to need for a while because I had nothing at that point.
Mm-hmm. And
it was so tedious to keep going back inside this building or that building to get the thing that I found, and on each additional go that I gave up, and maybe I'll revisit it at some point.
It's easy to get stuck in the hinterlands.
Yeah, I was stuck in the hinterlands. Because effectively, it is a roguelike style experience, but it is bad at messaging that.
Yeah. And, you know, it's got a lot on its shoulders to message to you what is going on as you're playing it without spoiling what's going on, because it's it's complicated, but like once it clicks, you're like, oh, all right. And like I kind of want to go through. There's a handful of different endings, and I kind of want to know what some of the other ones are. Because wow, you can resolve things as you piece together what's actually going on and how it all works. There's some choices you could make about how you feel about it.
So next up on the list is Deltarune Chapter 2.
Yeah, because for some reason this came out and for some reason it cost no money.
He promised it wouldn't.
Yeah, well.
I mean, that's not a reasonable reason.
No. He promised it wouldn't not cost money. He promised it would cost money.
Yes, well, it still didn't because apparently, because 2020 sucked, he decided this shouldn't cost money. Which, like, okay, sure, I guess. But yeah, this was like part 2 to Deltarune, so we could see where things are actually going and maybe get some idea of what's actually going on. And I think it did a pretty good job of that, of continuing to set the stage of this Undertale fanfic. Which I guess isn't entirely fair anymore, because this is definitely growing beyond Undertale fanfic at this point.
I mean, I have not played it, but it does seem like there's a bunch of new characters in the center of everything now.
I mean, those characters were in part 1. They were just not important at all.
Yeah.
So I can now definitely say it is its own story and it's not just Undertale fanfic. That said, I really like the stuff that was done with this game. And this is mostly on the list just as a nod to this came out. Seems really cool. I really want to know where this is going.
Yeah, I need to play through. I actually need to refresh myself on Deltarune Chapter 1. I think that's what I'm going to do is just go replay through all of that. Because I started it back up and I was like, oh, right, something was going on. And this is definitely a direct continuation. And I should just go back and play Deltarune Chapter 1. Because I don't remember any of this.
I've contemplated trying to go back to Chapter 1 just to beat the super boss of Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. The music is extremely good in Chapter 2. And that's honestly a large part of the reason it's on this list this year.
Love it.
Maybe one day we'll get video of the Pope listening to it, played live for him.
Oh my god.
That's so very
Someone
weird.
commented that that's actually the Homestuck version, not the Undertale version.
Okay, that's even weirder.
Any story that leaves you wanting to know what happens next is doing things right, in my opinion.
The promise of episodic gaming, almost 10 years ago was shorter game released more quickly at lower prices. And we've got some of that, I guess. Although I would, at some point like to give money for this game. Seems good. Seems worth, paying money for. So how about it, Toby?
So next on the list is Haven.
Yes. Very much my list. Very much from my games list. Trying to figure out where do I even start with this? I talked about Haven on the show. I may not have mentioned that it was a significant driving factor for me proposing to my wife. But it's in a lot of ways, it's one of those like stop and smell the roses kinds of games, but it's also a delightful story about a couple and their like weird sci-fi situation, but also just like them being normal people day to day. And like I have a new entry. One of the things that I'm continually frustrated by in video games and media in general is the lack of good, healthy relationship depictions.
Yes.
To the point where I have a wall of commissioned art whenever I play a game or watch a show or see some piece of media where I'm like, hey, this is actually a really well done, healthy relationship, or at least one that isn't fundamentally and fatally flawed. And there's not as much art on that wall as you might think. Haven added to it because it's a really simple and gorgeous, like cell shaded art style. You either play as a couple or each person plays as one member of the couple, making their way through this planet that they're on, that they've run away to. and understanding it better and understanding, and like it unfolds with both their whole situation and who they are as people, and it's not all like cheerfulness and happiness and light, but it's also not like unbelievable tragedy. And like sometimes it's like there's whole sections where they have genuinely stupid arguments, and then they have a conversation the next day where they're both like, I don't know why we got so worked up over that. I'm really sorry. It was a stupid argument. And that's the kind of good communication I want to see. And there's just, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff like that where I'm like, I really like Haven for the amount of good and thoughtful stuff that it's doing, and the interesting, like, sweet and cute story that it's telling throughout this like whole weird situation. I don't know. It's just a beautiful game. I played through it with my partner. It was a joy for both of us. It's just a great game to play with somebody else. Even if that other person is not that big into video games or that excited about them, it's still great.
Yeah, I remember seeing this in one of the game shows and wanting to play it, and then just never quite getting around to doing so. It looks delightful.
It's totally delightful. It's one of those things where like a close relationship with another person of any kind, but a close relationship with another person is a very like complicated, nuanced thing. And this does a lot of interesting stuff with that, and like really hits all of the different parts of relationships with people, and like in a lot of cases what that even means.
So next on the list is Psychonauts 2, and this game has been a very long time coming.
Yes, it has. And I was so happy that it finally came, and that it was brilliant. And I don't know, Ash, he was talking about Chicory earlier and said that, this was like the game that he needed this year. I think Psychonauts 2 was a game that I really needed this year. So the original Psychonauts came out 20 years ago, maybe more than that. And it was a game that was mostly pretty goofy. You're playing a kid that ran away from the circus to go to a psychic summer camp and falls into this like ludicrous plot to like steal brains and use them to power weapons of war. But then there's also these like little hints of just like real pathos and darkness here and there hidden about, and like these characters who are mentally broken, and in the process of playing the game and doing what you need to do, you in a lot of cases manage to help them work through some of what's what's wrong. And so Psychonauts 2 leans even more into that. Like, this is very much a game about coming into a situation as a newbie that is like decades in the making of it getting to of it being at the point that it's at now, and dealing with the mistakes of the past and the things that caused people to break apart from each other. Like, without spoiling too much, this is the basic premise is there's this organization, the Psychonauts, that in the first game is very much framed as kind of a super spy organization that protects the mindscape and all of this. And it is that, but you learn very quickly that that's not what it originally was. It started out as a group of friends who came together to chart the mysteries, the unknown mysteries of the mind, and like work together to learn more about their powers and the mindscape. And something happened, something horrible happened, and only two of those people are even still around. And one of them, his mind was apparently irrevocably shattered in the process. And the core of the game is learning more about that thing that happened and those people, and dealing with the repercussions and trying to repair some of that, and it can't all be repaired, but making things better. And it still manages to, like, it still has the ludicrousness of the original game, like, you know, the weird characters, but it leans more into the pathos. And I just loved it. And then is also, you know, a excellent platformer that, like, originally I thought this is a lot easier than the original, and it's really not. It's just that the controls are actually responsive like they should be.
You also start as a competent platformer.
Yes, you also start with some of the abilities that you don't gain until later in the game in the original. So, but the main thing is the controls are much more responsive. Like they learned how to make a platformer in the intervening years. But yeah, this was my game of the year easily.
Kind of wish they would release a, I don't know, updated UI version, not UI, but updated controls version
of the original.
Original.
Yeah.
So you can actually like play it in a way that doesn't make you want to hurt somebody.
Yeah, they did a patch a while back that improved things a lot from its original state, but even that was a long time ago, and some additional control cleanup would be good.
Yeah.
Like, maybe at some point they can do a remaster or something. They do leave a few threads, like establish a few threads and leave an opening for a possible third game at some point if they decide they want to do that. Like Tim Schafer has said, you know, they have other things they want to do in the meantime. But
I was going to say,
it's something they might come back to.
Hopefully not as much of an unresolved thread as was in Psychonauts 1.
No, it's much more like a couple of characters. One character in particular says a thing and leaves, and like it's very much a, oh wait, that's interesting. That could be like the inciting incident for a third game. That if they do decide to do that, almost certainly would result in returning to Whispering Rock Summer Camp, at least for part of the game. But yeah, another thing is, like, by the end of the game, you have fundamentally changed the state of the world to a degree, like, because you've repaired some things and you've helped people that are very important people. So I'm very curious to see where they might go with that, if they do.
Well, in another 20 years, we'll see.
Yeah, like, you know, eventually after they've gotten, you know, whatever other stuff they want out of their systems. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot
in 20 years. Close, though.
Yeah.
They've done a lot of stuff in the intervening time.
Absolutely.
Yep. A lot of really good
basically
stuff.
Inventing Kickstarter gaming.
Mm-hmm.
I quite liked Double Fine Adventure.
Yeah, I was a big fan of Broken Age.
Yeah.
Okay, next up on the list, Subnautica Below Zero.
Hey, it's another sequel. This one was a no-brainer for me. I spent a really large number of hours playing the original Subnautica, so I knew I was going to play this one as well, and I did myself the favor of waiting until it was actually released instead of playing it in a fragmented way in various early access stages, and I was rewarded with a really excellent game. It's no secret I loved the original, and I think in a lot of ways I liked the sequel better. It has a story. I mean, the first one has a story also, but it's very thin and atmospheric. The sequel has an actual story, and it's not the most complicated thing, but it's interesting. It gave me something to focus on and keep moving me forward instead of letting me get distracted wandering around the beautiful ocean, which is still incredibly beautiful. I mean, that's the thing with both of those games. Like, I could just swim around looking at pretty things and be perfectly happy. And then I also get to build a sea base, which is fantastic. And then with this one, you added an interesting story about finding out what happened to your lost sister, and it was just incredibly satisfying. I can't say enough good things. It felt to me like it was shorter than the original, but it's not. I just was so invested in it that I motored through it much more quickly. And I think that that's a good thing in this case. And I still can return to it and do all of the exploration and base building pieces that I enjoy. So it's always there and welcoming. I think I also really appreciated that I felt like the crafting made, I don't know if it made more sense, if it was just a little bit smoother in terms of finding materials and figuring out where to get materials and patterns, but that it was, I think, a little less onerous. I appreciated that a lot in the sequel. And, you get to also go up on land and ride a snow bike around with snow worms and things. I mean, the best parts of those games are the underwater bits, but in this case, the land parts were a lot more functional than they were in the original game, so I appreciated that.
And there's always the are they cute or are they creepy aspect of the penguins.
Yes. The answer is yes.
Sounds like penguins.
I do have to say that they kind of did themselves a disservice by not adding a 2 into the name, because for the longest time I thought this was just a DLC pack for the original.
Yeah, same.
This was another Wii U situation.
Yeah, I definitely get that. And even initially I had the same thought, but because I'm so invested in it, I was looking up whatever I could about it, and it was pretty clear once I dug into it that it was its own entire game, which was really exciting. And I'm grateful for that also because because the games have a fixed world, it's not a procedurally generated world. Having a actual sequel instead of a DLC means there's another really large world to explore from scratch, and that's one of the things that I really liked about it.
Good point.
I love DLC add-on packs, but I also have a really bad history of not actually playing them until I do a full playthrough later.
Mm-hmm.
Because like Horizon Zero Dawn, I didn't play the DLC content until it came out on the PC, and I did another full playthrough from scratch.
I still need to play that.
Yes, you do.
It's really good. The DLC is amazing. It's, I don't know, like a third of the rest of the total game. Like, it's a really long DLC.
For which game?
Horizon Zero Dawn.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, I didn't realize that.
You go up into a totally new area with stuff that you've never seen before.
Yeah, I also
probably relevant for the sequel.
I have a feeling it is going to be really relevant to the sequel.
I should go check it out.
But that's the problem, though, is a lot of times if it was a game that I was super into, I've already burned through the base game by the time the DLC comes out. I'm like, I'm not going to revisit it this soon.
The game that Dishonored 1 is the game that comes to mind.
Yeah, and I didn't play through that until I was on a second playthrough trying to lead up to Billy Lurk.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, in DLC like that, they do a bad job of messaging how to get to the pieces that were added in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's often a problem.
So, next game on the list is Tales of Arise.
Yay, Tales of Arise. This was one of my picks. Part of this Maybe because this was like the first game that we got on our brand new PS5. So it was kind of the fun breaking into system game. But also earlier this year, my husband and I had like played through Star Ocean 1 through 5. And I hadn't played Star Ocean 5.
Wait, 1 through 5?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd played all of them except for 5.
That's a lot of Star
That's
Ocean.
a big commitment right
Holy
there.
It was. It took us several months, like
Just-
over weekends.
Yeah.
It's a hell of a thing to just casually drop like that.
Oh yeah. So we just did this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you do. But so I hadn't played 5, and there was a lot of it that was fine, but there was enough of it that kind of left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, because Star Ocean is one of my favorite series, and 5 was okay, but there was a lot about it I didn't really enjoy. So when it came to playing Tales of Arise, I guess it hit a lot of notes that like, oh, okay, it kind of got me out of the, well, I'm not really happy with, RPG stuff right now. And just, it hit a lot of right notes that, kind of made me perk up. And it was nice playing on the new system. It had a much more fun cast of characters than, I know I played Tales of Symphonia way back, but I haven't actually played a lot of the Tales games since. For some odd reason, I don't know how I've managed to miss this entire series of games. But I enjoyed the cast of characters. I enjoyed the setting. And the story, it started out with kind of the fantasy thing, and later on you do get a little bit of the sci-fantasy thing going on, where I was like, oh my gosh, this kind of gives me Star Ocean vibes. So that made me really happy, especially after completing the big marathon that we did. And so it was just, it came out at the right time where I really enjoyed it. The combat was a lot of fun. Like, I started out very button mashy, and then by the end of the game, I was actually pretty good at doing certain combos versus certain sets of monsters. So I felt pretty competent. You get 6 characters, and each character has a slightly different play style and sets of moves. So that was kind of cool. I mostly focused on 1 or 2 characters, learning them really well. Like, I learned Alphen very well. So I had a lot of fun with him. Probably one of the biggest complaints is later on in the game, the enemies are probably a little bit unnecessarily tanky. Like, they just have a lot of HP, and it takes a while to wear them down. So that was kind of annoying, but I enjoyed the characters a lot. The story was fun. I enjoyed a lot of the settings. The game is very beautiful. It's got some really nice aesthetics going on. And just, we had a lot of fun just sitting down and enjoying it, and just kind of like, laughing through some of the silly skits, because they have those little, they call them skits, little scenarios that they're optional, but if you want to see the characters kind of talking about some different silly things here and there, it's entertaining. I wouldn't say the story was super groundbreaking, but it was engaging enough, and like we were pretty into it.
I've never actually played a Tales of game. Is there like, this is kind of a gaming blind spot. Is there like, are they generic fantasy stories? Do they have like a consistent theme? Are they like Final Fantasy, where they have a bunch of iconography that they carry through them?
It's more like Final Fantasy.
Except less iconography and more systems, except
more
not really. I don't even know how to explain this.
Like the couple that I've played around with, it seems like the character interaction is focused way more than at least early JRPGs.
I mean, that is a Tales thing. You have all these skits where characters talk to each other all the time, and so on and so forth.
It's a lot like, I mean, because the Bravely Default games have some of that going on too, where you can listen to little side conversations, and it really fleshes out the motivations of these characters. But also,
where that comes from.
This sounds, honestly, the game that I'm thinking of is 3 Houses, but not a tactics.
Not
RPG.
quite like that. No.
Okay, not like that.
Yeah, it's not like that. I'm trying to think of an analog.
Okay,
Did you play Bravely Default 2 at all?
I have not.
Do you remember the character cutscene things from Bravely Default 1?
Kind of.
It's got a bunch of that, and then the core like, I think the big thing that sets Tales games apart from other similar JRPGs, Final Fantasy defined turn-based combat, and so you get into a fight and you go into a turn-based combat mode. At some point, somebody split off and said, "What if that was a fighting game?" That's Tales.
Well, and it's almost like, what if you engage an encounter, but instead all of a sudden you're in an instance of Secret of Mana style combat? Because like it's not top down like Secret of Mana was, but
yeah, it's not a fighting game like Street Fighter. It's more like Power Stone.
Mm-hmm.
They're super charming games.
Yeah.
So is Tales of Arise, would that be a good first Tales game? Is there another one that would be a better one to start
Tales
with?
of
'Cause I've also never
Vesperia
played any
was
of
the
them.
Vesperia is
one.
my normal recommendation for first Tales game.
Yeah, Vesperia is up there. If it were still reasonable to play Symphonia, or if it were like out of date, I would recommend that one because I loved Symphonia.
I think I would recommend Vesperia over Symphonia most of the time.
I think you're right. I'm sad that you're right, but I think that you're right.
I hear Berseria is a good place to start, but I mostly missed that game.
Same. Zestiria
Wouldn't recommend starting with Tales of Z.
No, Tales of Z is not. Boy, that game is doing some weird things, but I don't recommend starting with it because it's a little overly weird.
Okay.
I liked what I played of Tales of Arise. I kind of dropped off of it for reasons that I can't remember.
I think you started playing Guardians.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's got kind of a bleak start.
Well, yeah, that's true. It does.
I never quite got out of the bleak start part.
Yeah, I would say that I think once you get the full cast of characters and you have them kind of talking amongst themselves in the skits and that kind of general interaction, that it makes the bleakness a little more bearable, because it is, there's a lot of horrible stuff going on, and it's kind of a not great world that, the story is taking place in. But I found the cast pretty engaging, and they were pretty fun. Like, I wasn't sure I was going to like some of them, and then like, oh, okay, you're actually you're fun. I like you. You're okay.
So how long does that take? Are we talking like 5 to 10 hours? Or are we talking like till the end of time? One day I'll be off of Vanguard.
Yeah, no. Let's see here. I think it's like the final two people you pick up are in like the quote unquote like third zone. Okay. Like the first one is kind of the tutorial zone where you get the first two characters, and then you meet up. In the next zone you pick up two more, and then the third zone you get your last two. So it does take a little while, but I felt like the first zone was decently quick, and then the second one a little longer. I don't really have a very good hour count on that. I'm just trying to think. Yeah,
that's one of the things that I remember about Vesperia, is that it felt like it was very effortless to get into the game.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Your party was built pretty quickly, and you stuck with your party for the most part. And like there was a call to action, and then you're just going, and it's pretty smooth.
Right. Like they give you like some temporary characters, so it's not just like you by yourself or you with just like two characters or whatever right at the start. So you kind of have a few tools here and there so combat doesn't feel quite so overwhelming at first. But yeah, I did enjoy the combat. It was pretty fast and fluid, and like you have 4 characters on the field, and then the other 2 were kind of in reserve, and you can still do like boost strikes with them like at certain times when a meter fills, and they do flashy attacks and fun stuff like that. So everybody is more or less useful in combat, even if there's only a certain amount of people on the field at a time, and you can change them on the fly to, like, if a character dies on the field and you don't want to res them, just swap in one of the reserve members. So I appreciate stuff like that.
Very Tekken Tag tournament.
Yeah. Some of the bosses early on felt kind of tricky, but they felt very satisfying when you beat them. I found out quickly that accessories are very necessary. Like you want to have the right accessories for going into certain boss battles. They will help a lot. But I felt the first couple of bosses felt very rewarding when I beat them after kind of figuring out the best way to go about stuff. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed my time with it. I almost platinumed it, which I usually tend to do with some of the games that I really enjoy the most. So I will probably go back and do that at some point. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with it.
The next game is Mechwarrior.
So yeah, we played a lot of Mechwarrior this year. I think this is the year that we really got into it, actually. Maybe it was last year.
Time has lost all meaning to me.
Yeah, time has lost. But Mechwarrior is a game that really lets you, like, it is a game about being in a mech, and more than almost any other game, you get to feel like you're in a big mech. You are kind of slow and trundly, and you've got a whole bunch of different armaments on your character, and like you don't necessarily control like a character, you control more like a vehicle. And like the missions they send you on feel like appropriately big mech missions, like go stomp your way through a town, like destroy a bunch of buildings by running through them. The overarching like plot here is that you're a bunch of mercenaries and you're just keeping flying. You go from system to system on this star map, doing jobs for various factions, and earning money that you can then use to maintain your mechs. And this game, more than any other game, got me into like the mentality of I am going to tune up my mech and I am going to tweak it and I'm going to try new stuff and I'm going to keep going through different things and like fiddle with stuff until it like just feels as good as possible. And like, hey, can we go to another system where we can see what parts are for sale? Because I want to try and find one specific part that I'm going to slot into my mech and see what that feels like. Yeah,
there's this kind of player fantasy that I really love, which is like I'm a pilot of a thing and I have tweaked and tuned and kitted out my thing to fit what I want to do perfectly. And then I go out and, stomp around or fly or whatever the case may be in this very like personally customized thing. And the baseline game didn't do a great job of delivering on that, but the modding community absolutely has.
Yeah.
We kind of dropped out of it at one point because the DLC they released a big DLC patch, which kind of broke the mod that we were using that added all of this fun depth to it. But relatively recently, there's been another modder that has picked up the work, and now there's a even more detailed, honestly, mech lab.
And they've also added more content. They've added 2 DLCs in the intervening time, and the one we're doing recently feels really good. It's got a whole new career mode where you're more flying around trying to just establish your mercenary squad. And
let's be clear that game's original story mode was not very good.
Yeah, but it's a Mechwarrior story. Like, I don't necessarily think most Mechwarrior stories are very great. Like, it's very Arthurian knights. It's like it's so weird because the whole story aesthetic is you are like a knight or like a classical like questing hero, only instead of swords and sorcery, you're in a big mech. Like there are competing houses, and there are an aristocracy and noblemen, and like people are going to war to press claims, and like they're doing all of these political marriages, and it's very much that like that medieval aristocracy intrigue thing, only being played out with big stompy robots. And also, like, you're in a weird Dark Ages period where, like, no one knows how to do, like, it's got a little bit of what feels like some Contact from 40K going on, which I have to assume is because they were being, like, co-developed at the same point back in the 80s, where, like, no one is building new tech, it's all old tech. But unlike 40K, the story actually progresses in meaningful ways. But we're definitely square in like the Dark Ages before the clans return and bring with them all of the cool new mechs that invalidate everything that came before them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like this game, I've played a lot of games, and I honestly feel like maybe it's just because Mechwarrior mechs have more axes to work on, but this game made me feel more like a gearhead than any racing game I've ever played. Yeah.
I mean, it's a big reason why I've played Mechwarrior games since I was a kid and love them for that. It's also why, like, one of my favorite games ever is an old game called Freelancer, which is the same concept, but with a spaceship.
Man, and let me tell you, as soon as I feel like I can see the shadow of Star Citizen, and we're gonna not talk about it too much because it's not on this list yet. But as soon as I see the fragment of Star Citizen letting me modify my ship in the way that Mechwarrior lets me modify my mech, I'm going to be so lost to that game. Because honestly, yes, I want to sit there and tinker endlessly with something like. I want to build the Millennium Falcon, souping it over like months of runs.
Pick out the chassis that you like. You get the right cooling, the right maneuverability, the right engine speed, all of these little pieces, and then gets you to something that feels uniquely you.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds like you are explaining exactly how I feel about so very many games where build creation is the important part.
This is a huge part of, this is why it's a huge part of why I love minis games, because I feel like I'm taking a bunch of pieces that are available to anybody, but I'm taking a bunch of pieces and constructing them into a thing that feels uniquely mine.
So what I will say,
you being in a Phoenix Hawk is going to be a meme forever now. Just so you're aware of that.
No, I am trying to get back to that in Phoenix Hawk. Yeah. So this is 100% a thing where I was like, we were going out on 400-ton missions. That meant you are supposed to be taking 4 super heavy assault mechs. And I was like, you know what? I think I just want to go back into my Phoenix Hawk here, which has 8 medium lasers and goes 130 kilometers an hour. And I'm just going to run so fast that no one will ever hit me. And it was a wildly different game. Like, most mechs don't care about the flora of the planet they're on, but that Phoenix Hawk hits a tree and like you notice a 30 kilometer per hour dip in your speed. It's like, no, I need to be like dodging and weaving, and it felt great to play. It felt so cool. And then I would just like get right into somebody's back arc and blow them up and then run off to the next thing. I painted myself like Sonic the Hedgehog colors. It was so fun. Your thing about minis game makes me want to make a point of like, I understand what you're saying, and one of my thing is I want all of those decisions come to a whole, whereas mini games feel like they are a army, but that army is still like disparate models, and for some reason that doesn't click in my head as like creating a whole thing. I want all of those decisions to come into a singular whole thing that I control.
If there were a minis game that somehow like was 1v1 mech combat.
Oh yeah.
Where you super hyper customized your one model. Yeah, I would be distressingly into it.
Battletech, but good.
Yeah.
Isn't that what? Not Frosthaven, but we're getting wildly off topic. Anyway.
I mean, this is incidentally also why I'm having so much fun with Lancer right now, is because I feel like I'm doing very similar things in Lancer, where like Lancer doesn't let me customize quite to this degree, but it's hard to say because the customization is more discrete. Like you pick systems and those systems do a thing, but it still lets you make a whole bunch of different mechs that are very interesting. And it's also worth noting that there's probably a reason why for a relatively niche product, there's a ton of people who are like, let's talk about weird custom Lancer builds that you can do with 6LLs. Because that's fun. I want to feel like that mechanic. It's my player fantasy, and I feel so good when I'm doing it.
Yeah, I love that this thing that I am doing is a reflection of myself. I am expressing myself through this thing that I have built and am playing with. And it's hard to get. There's just not that many games that do it.
Well, as often is the case, I hope you all enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See you.